tell me when you're good.
Yeah, when do we start?
I'm good.
Started.
Did we go?
Okay.
Yeah, I
One, two,
started
three, go.
mine.
Alright, so I'm just going to go through this skull with you guys real quick so you can watch this as much as you want. So we're going to start with the fetal skull. Obviously, it's the small one. You have your fontanelles. There's 4. You have your anterior fontanelle here. Posterior fontanelle is here. Then you have a couple on the side. You have a sphenoidal fontanelle, and then you have a mastoid fontanelle. It's the soft spots of the skull. Bones, frontal bones, parietal bones, occipital bones, temporal bones. So on this guy here, frontal bone, parietal bones, occipital bone, and on the side, temporal bone here, the temporal bone over here. So those are your major bones. Cracks, sutures. It's going to be your coronal suture. Your sagittal suture goes down the middle. Your lambdoidal suture goes across the back. And then around the sides, around that temporal bone, is going to be the squamosal suture over here. Lovely. Open the skull up. There's 3 major regions inside the skull called fossa. So you have your anterior cranial fossa here, your middle cranial fossa is here, and your posterior cranial fossa is back here. Okay, so put this back on. Go back on. Okay. I think I already did frontal bones, but it's okay. Frontal bones, parietal bones. Lovely. In the back, if we look inside of our suture, some skulls have them, some skulls do not. You can see these little bones right here that are completely surrounded by suture. There's cracks all the way around. There's 3 of them, 1, 2, and 3. Those are called Wermian bones. So Wermian bones are found within sutures. So you got 3 little Wermian bones. On your occipital bone, a couple of things you need to know. The foramen magnum is the huge hole here. It's where the spinal cord goes through. In addition, you got your 2 occipital condyles here and here. This is where your first vertebrae is going to basically hold on to your skull. So it's going to sit right here. First vertebrae, C1. The ethmoid bone. So if we open up the skull, ethmoid bone is found here. It makes a little bit of the insides of the eyes and also inside the nose. So inside the lovely ethmoid bone, what do we need to know? We need to know the cribriform plate. So the cribriform plate is the flat bone right here that has little tiny holes in it. And the little tiny holes are called olfactory foramina. So just remember the olfactory foramina are in the cribriform plate, which is part of the ethmoid bone. This little pointy little rooster tip thing is the crista galli, so it's this little nub that sticks up. And the last part you need to know for the ethmoid bone is inside the nose, there's a bone that goes up and down that makes your septum. That's going to be the perpendicular plate. So it's going to be that central bone, dead center, that makes the septum of the nose. The sphenoid bone. Sphenoid bone is going to be this whole middle region here. So it's going to be kind of shaped like a big butterfly. So you can see it here, and you can also see it on this side too. A couple of things you need to know. The pterygoid processes are here and here. So it's kind of at the back of your teeth. Pterygoid process is sticking down here and here off the sphenoid bone. On the inside, there's 2 little holes. There's a hole here and here. These are going to be your optic foramen. That's where your optic nerves are going to come from your eyes and go to your brain. A couple more holes. If you look, these holes here, which are kind of oval shaped, hopefully everyone can see that, those are going to be the foramen ovale. The ones that are closer to the optic foramen are going to be the foramen rotundums, and the little tiny ones kind of lateral to the foramen ovale are going to be the foramen spinosum. A couple other things, this little saddle is going to be your sella turcica, and the back of the saddle, this ridge, is going to be your dorsum sellae right here. More holes on the sides of your saddle. These big round holes right here are going to be your foramen lacerum or lacerum, however you want to pronounce it. And now we're on to page 2. The temporal bone, remember that's the side that kind of wraps around where your ear is. It's got a couple of different portions. Up here next to the squamous suture is going to be the squamous portion of the temporal bone. Here next to where you have your hole, your external acoustic meatus, is going to be the tympanic portion of the temporal bone. This is your mastoid process, or the mastoid portion of your temporal bone. And then back here where you have lots of holes, it's going to be your pterygoid process of your temporal bone. Also on the inside, kind of this ridge, would be petrous portion. What else do we need? We need the mandibular fossa. So we put the mandible, this is the mandible, put the mandible on the face. Where the mandible actually sits and attaches to the skull, there's a little divot here and here. Those are going to be mandibular fossa on the left and the right. You have a pointy little needle-looking shaped bones. These are going to be styloid processes. So the styloid process is right next to the mastoid process. A couple more holes. So obviously this is the foramen magnum of the occipital bone. But now you also have jugular foramen, which are these big holes here and here. You can see them from either the inside or the outside of the skull. So those are the jugular foramen, the big ones. And then the last but not least, on the nice skulls, the perfectly round holes here and here next to your jugular foramen are going to be your carotid foramen. So that's going to be perfectly round. You can stick a pencil eraser down in there, baby. Your maxilla, your maxillary bone, is going to be your upper jaw. So it's going to be this whole region here. And if you look inside at the palate, this is going to be your palatine process of your maxillary bone. So it's going to be basically the front, probably 2/3 of your hard palate, the roof of your mouth, is going to be palatine process. Behind the little crack, this is a separate bone called the palatine bone. So the palatine bone is in the back. Zygomatic bone. The zygomatic bone is your cheekbones. So you have a zygomatic bone here, a zygomatic bone here. The nasal bones are going to be what makes the bridge of your nose. So here and here are your two nasal bones. Lacrimal bones are going to be this little bone right here that surrounds this little hole. Remember, you guys are crying because this class is terrible. You're going to drain the tears through the lacrimal bone, okay? So that's going to be great. It's going to make your nose run, get boogers. It's going to be fantastic. A couple more bones. So inside of the nose, I said there's basically most of your septum is the perpendicular plate, but along the very bottom, there's a ridge of bone right here that I'm flicking with my fingernail. That's going to be the vomer bone. So the vomer bone is kind of the bottom of the septum. Inside, if you could look inside, there's actually going to be other little flaps of bone on the sides. You can kind of see them a little bit if you look down in there with your little cameras. Those are going to be your nasal concha. And there's another view in a different model we'll see next week where I can show it to you a little bit better. The hyoid bone is on Herbert. He's the skeleton in the front, so we're going to have to take a quick walk. But other than that, this is your mandible. So your mandible has a couple of parts you need to know. The ramus is just from basically from here up. So this is big part is the ramus, or the arm of the mandible. The mandibular notch is this dent right here, and the mandibular condyle is right here that actually attaches to the skull. So the only thing we didn't see is a hyoid bone. So if we turn around, 2 seconds, and then we're all done with the video. Your hyoid bone on Herbert is right here. So it's just this little guy that looks like he has little vampire teeth hanging out, hyoid bone. But that's it for the skull.